Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Dreyeski, and this presentation will be about the amazing Morgan Parker. So before writing this presentation, I had never heard of Morgan Parker, but I really liked the idea of researching someone who is actively creating right now in our current world. She is most notably a poet, but she's also an editor, essayist, and novelist. She's published multiple collections of poetry and essays, and recently a YA novel. I realized while writing this presentation that I've never really read poetry by someone who isn't dead, current poetry. So in the second half of this talk, I will be doing a bit of analysis of one of her poems. Some background information on Morgan Parker. She was born on December 19th, 1987 in Southern California, and that's where she grew up. She moved to New York for school, where she attended Columbia University for anthropology and creative writing, and then New York University to get her MFA in poetry. After her schooling, she moved back to Southern California and is currently living in Los Angeles. So even though she's only in her early 30s, I think she's 33, she is incredibly accomplished. As you can see from this slide, she made Brooklyn Magazine's list of 30 under 30 in 2016. Along with being a writer, she also runs an internationally touring Black feminist poetry duo with her fellow poet Angel Nafis called the Other Black Girl Collective. And there's a couple of pictures about that, of them together. She also hosts a live talk show called Reparations Live, which is on the left, and is one of the two curators of the Poets with Attitude reading series, and the poster for that is on the right-hand side. Not only that, but she somehow also finds time to be super active on social media. These are just a few of her tweets that I thought especially captured her personality, a bit of her worldview. Feel free to pause if you want to read them more, because I'm going to go to the next slide. So a little bit about her writing and writing style. Morgan Parker's poems are very modern, by which I mean they are very much about her current experiences, and they contain a lot of pop culture references. In interviews, she's talked a lot about the purpose behind that. For instance, in one interview for the Paris Review, Parker stated, "I write out of trying to archive and record my particular experience. It would feel false if I didn't include all those things that really shape contemporary life." And that quote's on the bottom of the slide. She went on to say, "Some writers want to write something that doesn't exist within a time, but I'm not interested in that. I want to capture particular moments in time." This is so different from most poets that I've studied, as most of them lived a long time ago, and the key feature of their poetry is how it's timeless, and Morgan Parker is just the opposite. I've noticed that in her writing, she's very honest and raw, and she's able to create some really moving poetry about what it's like to be a young Black feminist living in LA. One really cool quote about her from a review from Publishers Weekly about her book, Other People's Comfort Keeps Me Up at Night, read, "She's light of heart, but she is as set on understanding the world as on changing it." And that quote's on the top there. One more super distinct characteristic of her writings that really stuck out to me is that her titles are super unique. For perspective, some examples for titles are "Tokenism may cause the following side effects," "My sister says the white supremacy is turning her crazy," and the poem I'll be talking about more in depth in a minute is called "Let Me Handle My Business, Damn." Her titles are long and expressive usually. In the interview from Publishers Weekly that I talked about a minute ago, she also talked about her titles by saying, "I think that titles are very, very important, and I have so much fun with titles. It's giving you a preview of what you're getting into, sets up a situation or asks a question. It doesn't stand on its own. It's part of the conversation, and it's a declaration." So, without further ado, let's get into some poetry analysis. So I'm going to read through the poem and then talk about what stuck out to me and some possible interpretations. Once again, the title is "Let Me Handle My Business, Damn." Took me a while to learn the good words, make the rain on my window groan and sexy. Now I'm in the tub holding down that on sale Bordeaux, pretending to be well adjusted. I am on that real jazz shit sometimes. I run the streets, sometimes they run me. I'm the body of the queen of my hood, filled up with bad wine, bad drugs, mooshu pork, sick beats. What more can I say to you? I open my stylish legs, I get my swagger back. Let men with gold teeth bow to my tits and the blisters on my feet. I become electric. I'm a patch of grass, the stringy roots you call home or sister if you want. I could scratch your eyes, make hip-hop die again. I'm on that grown woman shit. Before I break the bottle's neck, I pour a little out. I am falling. So I really love this poem. The first thing I really noticed about this poem is the lack of punctuation, which makes it very fluid and leaves pretty much all the inflection really up to the individual reader's interpretation. The second thing I noticed is that many of the words used can either have multiple definitions or can refer to either the previous phrase or the following phrase. For example, the phrase I am, highlighted there, is the poem saying pretending to be well-adjusted I am, as in I am well-adjusted, or perhaps just using Yoda speak? Or is it I am on that real jazz shit? Well, I think it's both. It's very purposeful. And then there's sometimes that I have highlighted, which is used to say both I'm on that real jazz shit sometimes and sometimes I run the streets. My third example of this phenomenon is the word break, where it can mean both before I break and I break the bottle's neck. This double meaning is especially enhanced through the enjambment and the placing of the line break for that example. There are a few recurring themes in this poem that I noticed. One is sex, from the phrases grown and sexy, I open my stylish legs, bow to my tits, which are all highlighted. Another is drinking, from the phrases, on sale Bordeaux, filled up with bad wine, and then before I break the bottle's neck, I pour a little out. I just love that line. The last little theme I noticed is music and or dancing, which comes from the phrases, I'm on that real jazz shit, sick beats, the blisters on my feet, I become electric, and make hip-hop die again. These thematic repetitions are all a part of Parker just creating that raw, real imagery of life as a young woman. There's also a lot of contradiction in the poem, where Parker will go from describing herself, assuming the poem is about herself, as someone powerful, those are highlighted in blue, and then as someone who's kind of falling apart, who doesn't have her life together, those are highlighted in green. So these constant contradictions cause a kind of push and pull effect, which mimics, in my interpretation, the way a brain thinks with an anxiety disorder. That might not be what she was going for, but that's definitely how I interpret it based on my own personal experiences. So the last part of this poem that I want to break down is the tone. There's a lot of stress in the poem, and the lack of punctuation leads me to want to read it fast. With the combination of the title, Let Me Handle My Business Damn, and the line, What more can I say to you, right in the middle of the poem, the tone becomes a bit pleading. My interpretation of this is that Parker is asking not to be judged for her lapses, as in, yes, she's a grown woman who's a badass, but yes, she also gets drunk and is tired and doesn't have it all figured out, but that's completely normal. This poem seems to be from the point of view of someone who's had to do a lot of explaining and justifying to people, but doesn't want to do that anymore. She just wants to live her life. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening to me talk about Morgan Parker. I hope you are all inspired to go read some more of her writing, because it really is awesome. I have all the sources that I cited here, cited here, along with the links in case anyone's interested in reading about her or reading the interviews that I quoted. Thanks again for listening.